Well, we begin in Morocco, which is preparing to host global leaders next week. For days now, COP22 talks have been underway in the city of Marrakech. Thousands of delegates are discussing ways to implement the Paris Agreement reached last December. It is the most comprehensive deal to reduce global temperatures by cutting carbon emissions. The first week of the summit has been a productive one, but the real test begins from Monday when world leaders descend on the city. Right now, let's get you a quick update on COP22. I'm joined live from Marrakech by our correspondent, Dan Williams. Dan, just talk us through the highlights of the first week of COP22 there in Marrakech.
Yeah, it's been a number of key elements that have taken place in the last week. It has to be said, one of the key developments actually took place outside of Marrakech. Of course, the US election with Donald Trump being elected as the next president. Of course, he's a known climate change skeptic, and the ramifications of that really overshadowed, if you like, the first few days of this conference. But we have had some action here as well. The ratification process of the Paris Agreement continues at pace. We are now up to 105 countries that have ratified that Paris Agreement, with further countries expected to do likewise over the coming days, of course, as this COP22 continues. We have a new, of course, COP president in Salahuddin Mezouar, and it's his job, as you've said there, to really turn a roadmap, if you like, an action plan of that Paris Agreement into a reality, the promise into a reality. And of course, we've already had a number of discussions, a number of delegates here really focusing on what the fine print, if you like, of that Paris Agreement is all about. And that will continue, of course, over the coming days.
Well, Dan, as we've mentioned there, from Monday, world leaders will be gathering in the city of Marrakech. Do we know roughly how many of them will be there and what security has been put in place in Marrakech ahead of their arrival?
Yeah, we know that there will be upwards of 50 plus world leaders here for the high level segment. That will take place on Tuesday and Wednesday here at the venue here behind me. We know as well that most of those leaders that will be attending here, many of them will be from Africa, of course. The Africa continent will be most affected, of course, already by climate change. 36 of the 50 most affected countries on climate change come from Africa, so there will be great representation here as they look to put, of course, their points forward at the highest level in terms of climate change. There are other world leaders here as well, but this is a COP that will be lacking a US president and many of the other top world leaders, it has to be said, but that is because this is a COP which is all about action. So a number of discussion points with kind of lobby groups, government groups, as they look to refine exactly what that Paris Agreement is all about. As far as security is concerned, it is very tight indeed. The United Nations security forces working alongside the Moroccan police here. It is very tight around the venue as you also approach Marrakech, and of course that will no doubt be tightened in the coming days.
And finally, Dan, looking ahead, what is likely to be the biggest sticking points this coming week in Marrakech?
Well, there are a number, of course, that still needs to be decided. Of course, as they say, the devil is in the detail. And although the Paris Agreement, a landmark breakthrough Paris Agreement, it has to be said, of course, it isn't properly and clearly defined. And that will be what all of the delegates here will be looking to do. As far as this COP is concerned, of course, there is this agreement of lowering the temperatures to between 1.5 and 2 degrees. But even if all of the countries continue with their commitments and deliver on their promises, we're expecting that to rise towards about 3 degrees. So clearly a lot more concessions need to be done. That is going to be a key sticking point going forward. And then, of course, comes the economic side of this, the financing of this agreement. Of course, there are a number of countries that gain much of their finance through fossil fuels, for example. Of course, what will now happen to them? What will, of course, be the timing in terms of how to replace that funding? There will also be, of course, sticking points in terms of how cities and countries, of course, fund the switch towards green energy and how that impacts on business and how to help the developing and most vulnerable countries as well. There's been some agreement already on that, but again, needs further definition. So in short, as much as the Paris Agreement was of course seen as this big breakthrough, if Marrakech COP22 is to end with having moved, of course, this climate change movement forward, then there is significant work that still needs to be done.
Dan, thanks for that. CCTV's Dan Williams joining us live on the sidelines of the COP22 talks in Marrakech, Morocco.